leaves are turning from green to orange. Colder fronts are coming in. And the truth is, the truth can sometimes be cold and hard. And the truth also is, we're going to find out what some of these teams are made of around the country. As it's a critical weekend for many teams around the country in the higher end of Division I football. But that being said, welcome back to the Any Given Saturday podcast here on the YouTube platform, where anything could truly happen on any given Saturday. Ask what happened to Miami in that Georgia Tech game. That's literally a perfect example of that phrase. Anything happening on any given Saturday. We got a fun-filled and a critical weekend of college football coming up as we are now moving in on the second half of the season. As we, like I said earlier, we're going to find out what some of these teams are made of. We're going to separate contenders from the pretenders over the course of those next few weeks. As speaking of the next few weeks, we'll get We'll get that first college football playoff ranking in the next couple of weeks. We're going to see what this committee has been feeling about these various teams moving forward in the next couple of weeks. So trying to jockey themselves, trying to position themselves for that. We got some teams vying for conference championships, or at least to go to a conference championship. Bowl eligibility. Many teams get to bowl eligibility in the second half of the season as well. But we do have a critical college football weekend. As I mentioned before, we are looking at four top 25 matchups over the course of the weekend. And the spread for how these top 25 teams, when they will be playing, it could not be any more beautiful. I think it's a perfect balance between, the early slate and the later games. You literally couldn't script it up any better, even if it was a Hollywood movie, so to speak. So, gonna buckle up. We got quite a bit to talk about, as we're gonna talk about each individual top 25 matchup in today's podcast. And then I'm also gonna give you my best bets in terms of this upcoming college football weekend. What's a good bet for maybe this upcoming Saturday, or maybe a game that is outside of the Saturday main slate. I'm going to give you my thoughts in terms of best bets here tonight as well. So make sure you stick around for the whole thing, because we are already 2 for 2 in terms of week number 8 bets. We're trying to get to 4 for 4, though, like that Wendy's special that is oh so famous. So make sure you stick around for the whole thing, and it would truly appreciate it as well if you just take a few seconds to go ahead and smack that like button. When you smack that like button, not only does it let me know that you enjoy the content, but it also gets this out to more college football fans that are passionate about this sport, just like you guys are as well. So make sure you go ahead and smack that like button. You also see the size of our channel. We're a very new channel, only a handful of subscribers. I appreciate all the subscribers that have joined the channel so far, but you have a real opportunity to be an A1 since day one. You could do that simply by hitting that subscribe button. It only takes a few seconds to do both, if even that, and it would help me out tremendously if you did both of those things. So thank you in advance for doing that from the bottom of my heart. We got some big games. I'm so ecstatic about this weekend. I know some Ohio State fans are excited for this weekend. Biggest game of the year for both of these teams. And, we're not going to worry about an endpoint. I'll sort that out later. We have a big game starting off at noon. It's going to be on Big Fox, noon kickoff. Arguably the biggest game of the year thus far in the country. We got number 7 Penn State going on the road, going to the Horseshoe in Columbus, Ohio, taking on number 3 Ohio State. And it's even bigger if you consider how we rank these two teams. If you catch the last podcast and you saw the top 25 of the Any Given Saturday power ratings, we actually think these are the two best teams in the country right now. I truly believe that from the bottom of my heart. But that being said, both of these teams, at least both of their head coaches, seems like they have something to prove, and winning this game would get them closer to accomplishing just that. James Franklin has done a tremendous job of rebuilding the Penn State program after what happened with the NCAA penalties. This program was initially under the death penalty after the allegations of Jerry Sandusky turned out to be true. James Franklin has came in, not only has stabilized this program, but has this program at an extraordinarily high level. But he only has one Big Ten championship under his belt back in 2016, which also happens to be the last time that Penn State has taken down the Buckeyes of Ohio State. That was in Happy Valley. This Ohio State team, led by Ryan Day, though, also has something to prove. Over the last couple of years, has not made it to the Big Ten championship, has not beaten Michigan. For some Ohio State fans, maybe not necessarily being on the hot seat, but the seat's starting to get a little bit warm. I think that's ridiculous with the amount of success that Ryan Day has had, but he doesn't have a national championship to his name, at least not yet. Now, having said that, just because you haven't done something yet doesn't mean that you can't do it, that you're never capable of doing it. So, big game, obviously. This has college football playoff implications. Whoever wins this game is going to get a massive boost to their resume as we get closer to those first college football playoff rankings being revealed and utilized for President Top 25 rankings. And looking down at the conference level, whoever wins this game is going to get one step closer to winning the Big Ten East and ultimately going to Indianapolis in order to play in that Big Ten Conference Championship. Granted, both these teams will still have to play against Michigan later on this season. So speaking of those key factors, guys, if you enjoy defense, guys, this game is going to be for you. We talk, while these aren't the only two good defenses in the conference, I'm sure Iowa gets a lot of attention for its defense, and rightfully so. What if I told you that Iowa actually does not have the best defense in the entire nation, at least not from a statistical standpoint? That actually belongs to the Penn State Nittany Lions. Penn State has the best defense in the country, at least from a statistical standpoint. You want to talk about how good this Penn State defense has been so far this season? Penn State has only allowed 194 yards a game. That's it. That's counting passing and rushing yards. Nothing's happening through the air. Nothing is happening on the ground either. They're number one in pass defense specifically, only allowing 121 yards a game. Completion percentage, they allow less than half of their completions to actually be happen, right? They allow the least amount of first downs. Sacks per game, they allow 4.5 sacks. And they've only allowed 7 red zone opportunities. Forget scoring on this Penn State squad. You want to talk about trying to get into the red zone. It's been incredibly difficult for teams to get into the red zone against this Penn State squad. And I want to harp in on the sacks per game because Penn State, it's clear that they do have one of the best pass rushes in the country. And that's a big reason why we have seen Penn State be successful so far in this season. And also, the Ohio State offensive line is not the same offensive line that we might have seen over the past few years. Ohio State has lost a tremendous amount of talent on the offensive line over the course of this past season, and that has been reflected to, at times, what we've seen Ohio State done in this first half of the season. It's been a little bit on the inconsistent side. We have seen that offensive line play at a higher level over the past couple of games. That's part of the reason why they've been able to blow out Purdue, for example, even though that was on the road. And we also see that Ohio State team eventually pull away from Maryland. And I'll contend that Maryland could still make some noise in the Big Ten East, even though they are currently riding a 2-game losing streak. So the offensive line is getting better. However, this is going to be a big test for that offensive line. And it's going to be a big test specifically for Kyle McCord. We've seen Kyle McCord play in big games so far this year, and he's done enough in those big games to where he's not the reason they lose, right? So the last, and I could say big game in quotations, because I'm talking about specifically top 25 games. I'm talking specifically about the Notre Dame game. He was fine in that Notre Dame game, 21 for 37, 240 yards. Didn't turn the ball over, didn't throw any touchdown passes either. Only managed to get 17 points for that offense. 7 of them came at the very last second, in the very last play of the game. And I would contest to believe that I would think that Ohio State would need to score more than 17 points to win this game, right? And here's why I say that. So we talked about Iowa. Iowa being one of the best defenses in the country, and Penn State was able to score 30 plus on that Iowa defense that's so vaunted and has that reputation. So it makes you wonder, can Ohio State get enough plays from Kyle McCord in order to keep themselves in this game? Now, they will have home field advantage going in. He does have one of the best receiving cores in the entire country. Namely, he has a little somebody called Marvin Harrison Jr., who's had more than 100 yards receiving per game, has 5 touchdowns to his name as well. He also is leading an offense that is in the top 15 in terms of passing yards per game. That's good for 15th in the country at 308. So that receiving core versus the secondary is going to be an interesting matchup to watch. I'm going to give the slight edge to that receiving core just because I don't think there is a person in America, at least at the college level, that could guard Marvin Harrison Jr., at least on a consistent basis. But what they could possibly harp on if you're Penn State is maybe you could take advantage of that running back room for the Ohio State Buckeyes not being at their best right now. They've been battling injuries throughout this season. It's been a case for Ohio State the past couple of seasons. Trayvon Henderson and Mayan Williams, they were both held out last week because of unspecified injuries. So Chip Trayanum had started the game. He got hurt. So then Dallin Hayden, he had to, who was he's hoping the red shirt this year. He actually had to step in and carry the load. And listen, he was good, 11 for 76 for a touchdown. You're really relying on a 4-string running back, though. Could he help spark this running game that has been a little bit on the inconsistent side? You want to talk about inconsistencies? Ohio State is 94th in the FBS in terms of rushing yards per game. They've only averaged 135. So if Ohio State's going to be successful in terms of its offensive game plan, they got to have a balance. Can Trip Trayanum, can a Dallin Hayden step up and at least make it honest to where Penn State is not honing in on that passing game? They're not honing in to where their defensive linemen and their linebackers are just pinning their ears back and trying to get after Kyle McCord and test maybe an unproven offensive line, I would say at this point, because this is going to be, I would argue, this defense is better than the Notre Dame defense, and that defense gave Ohio State fits. Shoot, it even gave Caleb Williams fits last week. I think that defense is not as good as what Penn State has on their side of the ball. Now, it's not all guns and roses over for Penn State either, because one thing that Penn State has struggled with collectively as well is that Penn State has not really been able to get the explosive plays. They're actually in the bottom 10 in America in terms of plays that end up going for 20 yards or more. So conversely, for Penn State, could they possibly try to get some big plays? We haven't seen them do it yet, not at least in none of their 6 games that they have played. But again, they haven't really had to pull them out necessarily. This Penn State rushing attack has, for the most part, carried a load offensively. This is a top 20 rushing attack that Penn State sponsors. They're averaging over 200 yards a game on the ground. So we have that going for Penn State. If they can get enough big plays, I think Penn State can win this game. And that's the beautiful thing about this game. I was going back and forth this morning. I really don't know who's going to come out on top and win this game, because I think these two teams legitimately are evenly matched. And I'm going to reference the what FanDuel is looking at right now. So I'm looking at FanDuel's college football lines. I'm doing this as of about 3:30. That's when I am recording this. So the line right now is at 5.5 for Ohio State. And the model agrees with that 5.5. But here's the big caveat that I have. In my model, I always contend that college home field advantage is always matters more than professional home field advantage. Professional home field advantage, I equate it to about a field goal. In college, I equate it to about 5 points in the power rating model. So what does that mean? Is on a neutral side field, I think these teams are basically dead even. I think Ohio State would have a slight edge on a neutral field, maybe half a point. So I'm going to go in this case. I eventually settled on Ohio State winning the game. I'm not 100% confident that they will cover in this game. I don't think they cover personally, just because I have a hard time seeing this to where either Penn State or Ohio State, regardless on who wins this game, ends up winning convincingly. I'm talking about winning by double digits. I just don't see that in this particular game. We're going to rock, however, with Ohio State. And the main reason we're doing that, it comes down to that home field. Playing in your own stadium, sleeping in your own beds, I think that really matters, especially to 18 to 22-year-old kids who primarily still play this game at the college level. There's a lot more variability. There's a lot more volatility at the college level than there is at the professional level. As such, I think because Ohio State is on its home field for this one, I think Ohio State utilizes that, and they're going to be able to get the win. It's going to be a very close game, but I do think Ohio State pulls it out. I'm not confident that they do end up covering that 5.5 spread that's currently being listed on FanDuel. It really could go in either direction. But boys, that is really not the only top 25 game, at least not happening that has conference implications. Let's just go ahead and jump right into it. Let's jump right into that 3:30 game that's going to be on CBS. This is the CBS game of the week right here. And it's one of the more notable rivalries down in the South. It's that third Saturday in October. Tennessee, number 17 ranked Tennessee, is going to go on the road, and they're going to be taking on the Crimson Tide of Alabama. Big game for both teams as well, seeing as that whoever does end up winning this game, well, first and foremost, this is an elimination game for all intents and purposes for the college football playoff. Whoever loses this game is going to need a miracle. And I mean like winning out, somehow finding a way to win your conference, and also just, needing some major chaos happening around the country. Now, Alabama, at least at the SEC conference level, Alabama does have a little bit more wiggle room. If they do end up losing this game, they'll be tied for first place with LSU. They will play LSU in the future. So for Alabama, the goal of going to Atlanta and possibly competing for that SEC championship, it's still going to be alive regardless of whether you win or lose this game. It's just that if Alabama wants to go to the college football playoff, you have to win this game. For Tennessee, at the same time, this is a must-win for conference implications. This is a must-win for college football playoff implications. Tennessee, This is not a game where these two teams are in the same division. So Tennessee is in a different division. Tennessee is trying to chase Georgia. And let's say Tennessee loses this game. Even if Tennessee wins out, they find a way to pull the upset against Georgia. They would need Georgia to lose an additional game if the Tennessee Volunteers want to go to Atlanta. That's a big ask. That's a big ask considering Georgia has not lost more than one game in quite some time. It's been at least a couple of years. It's been a couple of years since anybody has been able to beat Georgia. But not to mention, this is a rivalry game. And we saw how important this rivalry game can be when we finally see a different result than what we've been accustomed to. Alabama has been on a massive winning streak. I think this was a 15-game winning streak that Alabama has had in the third Saturday in October. That was finally snapped last year when we saw Chase McGrath kick a 40-yard field goal as time expired. And when Tennessee won down in Knoxville, we saw how much that rivalry game does legitimately matter. We saw a field storming. We saw goalposts going into rivers. This matters for both teams. So in terms of Alabama and their home crowd getting up for this game, I could imagine that Alabama's home fans are going to rally behind this Crimson Tide football team for sure, because there is a realistic scenario where Alabama loses. And I'm sure Alabama's fans know this. So they're going to be loud, and they're going to be known for that loud noise and being a hostile environment. We're going to see just how hostile Tuscaloosa, Alabama can certainly be. And so it goes to Tennessee. Can Josh Heupel get his guys ready to go to play on the road? Tennessee does have an impressive record, 5-1. They've won the games that they've supposed to win for the most part. And I say this because, yes, Tennessee is 5-1. They have a very good record. They're on the verge of bowl eligibility already. However, they only went on the road one time this year. One singular time. And it was that game against Florida. Y'all remember this? That game against Florida? And they lost to the Florida Gators. That was the only time that Tennessee has gone on the road. So can Josh Heupel get his guys ready to play outside of confines of Knoxville, Tennessee? Now, when you think about Tennessee, if you haven't taken a chance to watch Tennessee very much this season, you would think, oh, Tennessee, they got the high-tempo offense. They like to throw the ball down the field, throw it 50, 60 times a game. That's not this Tennessee team. That's not the case. That's not. The Tennessee team of today is nothing like the Tennessee team that we saw last year that led the nation in scoring at 46 points a game. That was at the tops of yards per game, averaging over 500 yards per game. It's not that team. Matter of fact, Joe Hilton III, completely different quarterback than Hendon Hooker. Joe Milton, he threw for just over 100 yards in that game last week against Texas A&M. He's only been averaging barely over 200 yards a game this season. He also only has 10 touchdown passes and 4 interceptions. It's not terrible by any means, but he's no Hendon Hooker. This passing offense is not like it was this previous season. Now, what Tennessee can do, what this Tennessee team is more than capable of, is running the ball. They are massive on running the football. They bring a three-headed monster, and that backfield has led them to being the best in the SEC in terms of its ground attack and in the top 10 in the country in terms of running the ball. Borderline top 5 if we end up taking out the service academies, because the service academies, of course, run that triple option. So all they do is, for the most part, run the ball. So if we take out the service academies, Tennessee is borderline in the top 5 in terms of running the ball. And they hit their average last week against Texas A&M. Oh, they sure did. They ran for 232, which is coincidentally what they have averaged over the course of the season. And what's more impressive that Texas A&M, they had a stingy rush defense themselves. They had the best rushing defense in the conference. In the SEC, they're allowing less than 84 yards a game on the ground going in. And Tennessee still ran all over them. So, can Alabama stop the run and force Joe Milton III to beat them? Because Joe Milton III, we haven't seen them have that real breakout game to where he's able to take over. And honestly, I don't know if Joe Milton III has that in him. He's got the cannon. There's no disputing that. He can launch bombs. There's no disputing that. But in terms of being a quarterback, like from neck up, we haven't seen him necessarily be able to do that at a high level. He's played at a very average level over the last couple of games against South Carolina, against Texas A&M as well. So that's a big key for Alabama specifically. Can you stop that rushing attack and be able to force Joe Milton III to beat you? And specifically, beat you through the air, because he's also a little bit on that mobile side as well. He could run it when asked to. He hasn't brought it out too many times, but he did run for almost 100 yards against UTSA, who could win the American. So he has it. He hasn't been able to. He hasn't really felt the need to use it, so to speak. Can they force Alabama to be beaten through the air by Joe Milton III? Can they do that? In addition, I think the trenches in general are going to have a big effect. Both teams actually are very strong at going and attacking opposing quarterbacks. But the big difference is that Tennessee actually has a little bit better of an offensive line. Would you be shocked if I told you that Alabama is ranked 126 right now in terms of sacks allowed per game? That is a stat that is really disappointing for the amount of talent that Alabama has had. Now, it could be for a bunch of different reasons. Could be because maybe Jalen Milroe is holding the ball too long, or there's miscommunication on the offensive line. It could be a multitude of reasons. But that offensive line needs to show up. And it's the same offensive line that's allowed multiple sacks in every single game. It's not that those sacks have happened in one or two particular games. No, they've allowed at least 2 sacks in every single game that Alabama has played so far this season. And that includes that mid-Tennessee State game that happened in the season opener. Let that go ahead and swallow that for a moment. And Tennessee can get after them too. They have 24 sacks so far in 6 games. They're led by James Pierce Jr. with 6, and then Tyler Barron with 5. So coincidentally, it would be in the best interest of Alabama to also establish that running game and maybe try to have a methodical drive or two to start things out in the first half, so that maybe those pass rushers for Tennessee, they don't end up being that one and only they don't get to Jalen Milroe. They're not as aggressive with it, is what I'm trying to get to. So what do we think is going to happen in this game? We got the line right in front of us right now. And again, as of about 3:30 when I'm recording this, Alabama is a -8.5. They're an 8.5 point favorite going in. But I do think that offensive line for Alabama is going to really struggle to contain the pass rush of Tennessee. I think this is, even though that they're going to be in Tuscaloosa, I don't think that this is a very good matchup. I don't think Alabama matches up well against Tennessee. Matter of fact, I think Tennessee is the more physical team than Alabama. That's kind of how Alabama's won their games. They've been the much more physical team in their games that they've won. I don't think they can do that against Tennessee. I really don't. And I think the model agrees with me that the model still has Alabama winning this game, but it's to less than a field goal. I think it's down to less than a field goal according to the power rating model. I think it's at 2.5 specifically. I don't have the model right in front of me, but ballpark, I'm expecting the model to be around there. But in terms of who I think actually is going to win this game, I think there's an upset on our hands, ladies and gentlemen. I think Tennessee might be starting a win streak of their own. I think they're tired of seeing Alabama win year after year after year in the third Saturday in October. I think this is a particular game where Tennessee uses that physicality to its advantage. And while I think Alabama defensively, it's about a push against Tennessee's offensive line, I think that advantage that Tennessee's going to have up front against an offensive line that has struggled tremendously this year, I think it becomes a big issue and it becomes the biggest factor in this game at the end of the day. So I'm going to go a step further than what the model says. The model says Alabama's going to win, but not cover. Not only do I believe that Alabama is not going to win this game, I truly believe as well that Tennessee, they're going to beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa. I think they get it done, and I think they pull it off, pulling a slight upset against the number 11 team in America, the Alabama Crimson Tide, and subsequently eliminate this Alabama team from college football playoff contention. And it's a lot happening. It is truly a lot happening on this weekend. I mean, you see how much I've been talking about Ohio State and Penn State, how much I've been talking about Tennessee and Alabama as well. And we still have a couple more games to go. We have 2 more top 25 games to bring to your attention. But you know what? Let's keep it down south. Actually, let's go even further down south, matter of fact. Let's take a trip down to Tallahassee, Florida for a critical ACC matchup that we have on our hands. And when this season first started, I'm sure there was quite a few people that did not peg this game as being a potential top 25 matchup down the line. But you know what? Teams surprise, teams disappoint. And yet here we are, halfway through the season. Duke is 5-1. There's also a scenario where Duke wins out, by the way, wins the ACC, possibly makes it to the college football playoff. That scenario is still in play, kids. Imagine that scenario. Duke in the college football playoff. Oh, boy, that would be a stir on Twitter. But they got to go on the road, though. Duke's got to go on the road against number 4 Florida State. Now, Florida State has been perfect thus far. They have their struggles at times. It has been perfect for Florida State. We've seen them stumble a little bit against Boston College. We've seen them against Clemson. They were in a fight for their lives against a Clemson team who's probably in the midst of having a little bit of a down season themselves. But it seems like they're picking it up the last couple of weeks. Florida State coming off of a 20-point win against Virginia Tech, and then now a 38-point win against Syracuse. So, big one also containing college football playoff implications. Florida State winning this game, what it would mean for them in the college football playoff picture is that Florida State gets another top 25 win on their resume as long as Duke continues to play at a high level at the rest of the season. And for Duke, at the college football playoff level, I mean, if they lose this game, they're out, which is longer, oddly enough, than what many people thought Duke was going to make it to. But if Duke loses this game, they are going to be out. In addition, we technically have a three-way tie at the top of the ACC right now. So Florida State is 4-0 in conference play. Duke has also not lost yet in conference play as well. And so if Duke wins this game, they move up into the top 2 and they would get the inside track as well in terms of making it into the ACC championship. The ACC this year has gotten rid of divisions. As such, doesn't matter what division you're in. So you have the 2 best records in the ACC. We'll see you in Charlotte, North Carolina for that neutral side conference championship game. Florida State, though, could have a real opportunity to also cement themselves a little bit more in that ACC championship race. Getting to 5-0 in conference play puts themselves in a really good position. I mean, a top tier position to make it to the ACC championship in Charlotte, North Carolina, because Florida State still has one more. Actually, they have a couple more non-conference games left. One is a FCS opponent against North Alabama. We don't know a lot about North Alabama, that's for sure. And then they also have Florida. Florida has quietly been a very good team down there in the Sunshine State as well. Could be a very intriguing matchup towards the end of the season, too. But Florida State historically has they've been rolling. Actually. They have won 12 in a row. They currently have the third longest active streak in America. And they have also scored 30 points in each of those 12 games as well. And that's the second longest 30-point streak in ACC history. So how does Duke pull off this upset? I want to talk in terms of with the spread being a little bit higher, with Florida State being listed as a 2-touchdown favorite in that 7:30 kickoff, which does happen to be on ABC as well. Well, nice little spread of wealth in terms of what stations are holding which top 25 game, right? With the spread being a little bit higher, talking about in that 2-touchdown range, I'm going to be talking more so in terms of how Duke can pull off this upset. And it comes down to two things, really, for the Duke Blue Devils. First, they have to contain Florida State's offense. We've talked to that winning streak that Florida State has. When they get the 30 points in the last 12 games, they have been able to win all 12 games. So history tells me if you're going to beat this Florida State squad, you're going to want to contain them to the low to mid 50 or the mid 20s, in that 21 to 24 range. Gonna have to keep Florida State in there. Gonna be a tall task though. Florida State has a lethal duo of wide receivers, Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson, experienced starters. They'll have but thankfully they do have some experienced starters. They have Al Blades Jr. and Porter Wilson, very experienced starters. They combine for 42 tackles this season. So they're very talented corners. One of the better corner duos in the entirety of the ACC. The problem is Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson. Those guys are him. Coleman has 29 receptions for 418 and 7 touchdowns. Wilson, and this is Johnny Wilson, I should say, who even is coming after missing a game, he still has 350 for 2 scores. So this is a very good receiver combination. Those corners are going to have to come and play. And it might be where you got to get safeties involved. You might have to do double teams against one or both, depending on what kind of situation that you're looking at. You're also possibly looking at getting a spy for Jordan Travis. And that's another thing too. Jordan Travis is the heart and soul, not of his offense, but I think of Mike Norvell's team. When you think of Florida State in 2023, you think of Jordan Travis. He's been arguably the most integral part of rebuilding the brand of Florida State football. And he's lived up to those expectations this year. He has 17 total touchdowns, and he also has done a spectacular job of taking care of the ball. He's only thrown 1 interception all year long in 6 games. And you'll also have an offensive line that's intact too. Just for the second time this year, Bless Harris, he was the day 1 starter at left tackle. He's missed some games, but he is expected to be back for this Duke matchup. That is a big return for Florida State, having that kind of experience on the offensive line coming back. They'll have their original combo that they had in game number 1 when they took on LSU and sent that message early on in the college football season when they won convincingly against LSU. And last but not least, Riley Leonard. What is going on with Riley Leonard? This is a guy that 3 weeks ago, Riley Leonard did end up spraining his right ankle in the loss to Notre Dame, a gut-wrenching loss for the Duke Blue Devils, their only loss, not to mention. And since then, they've had the bye, but we did not see him in the North Carolina State game. So, two questions here. Two questions in particular. One, do they get Riley Leonard back? And then two, if Riley Leonard is back in the starting lineup for the Duke Blue Devils, is he going to be at 100%, or is he going to be more of those? He's going to be able to play, but he's at that 60 to 70% per se. Coach Mike Elko has commented on the Blue Devils quarterback, saying that they won't put Leonard at risk if he doesn't feel that he's ready. But he did add that, quote, there is a chance we're able to get him back healthy and be able to be playing at the level he's capable of playing at. And Leonard has thrown for 912 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. He's been a little bit more effective on the ground, 326 and 4 scores. I think if Duke has any sort of shot of winning this game, I think Riley Leonard does have to play at a tremendously high level, because we know that this Florida State team can score. And while the Duke Blue Devil defense has been one of the more menacing and frankly underrated defenses in the entirety of the ACC, you can't rely on just your defense. You need a complete effort, I feel, if you're going to take down this Florida State team. And we talked about how best case, Duke needs to hold Florida State to like 21 to 24. Duke has to score at least 30 in order to win this game. It's not going to be like the North Carolina State game where they're going to be able to just scrape by with 24 of a backup quarterback, or the Clemson game, unless there's a bunch of turnovers that end up happening. So, couple of notes, just random fun facts about this game before I dive into who I think is going to win. So this primetime matchup marks just the 3rd time these programs have met when they've both been nationally ranked. And this dates back, this is the first of such matchups since 2013. So it's been about a decade since we've seen this kind of situation. The 5-1 start that Duke does have, that's the first since 2018. They actually have they're in the top half of the ACC with both offense and defense. Their offense in particular has scored 31 points a game. So Duke is capable of putting up 30 plus against Florida State. The question is, do they? I don't think they do without Riley Leonard, but if they do, they have a shot. But here's the thing, though. I think that even if Riley Leonard does end up playing in this game, which I think he does, I don't think he's going to be at 100%. And because I don't believe that Riley Leonard is going to be 100% in this game, I don't think Duke just doesn't have enough firepower, in my opinion, in order to keep up with Florida State. Now, they're going to be scrappy, they're going to be competitive, but this is probably going to be one of those games where Florida State starts to pull away in the second half and doesn't look back. So, with that said, I'm going to side with Florida State. The model has Florida State covering against Duke. I am going to agree with the model. I think that Florida State covers, but it's going to be one of those games where the game itself is closer than what the score actually says at the end of the game. Which does take us, and actually at the same time, well, not the same time, but roughly the same time. It's close enough. It is close enough, though. We got another top 25 matchup that's happening roughly at the same time. We have number 14 Utah making the trip out to LA, the city of angels, to take on the Trojans of USC, led by Caleb Williams. Now, this is an interesting case to see how much wounded animal mode really does matter. Because USC, the way that USC played last week in that game against Notre Dame, I'm sure that USC wants to come out and prove that they can dominate against their competition. And I'm sure Caleb Williams wants to prove that that game against Notre Dame itself, where he ended up with, I believe, 5 turnovers in that game against Notre Dame. I think he's going to want to prove that that game against Notre Dame was completely and absolutely a fluke. It's the worst game of Caleb Williams' career. The thing that I think about, though, is I think of what Notre Dame was able to do in that game against USC. And I can't help but think that Utah could possibly replicate some of the things that Notre Dame was able to do defensively. I mean, look at how much Utah has allowed defensively this year. And that's even with essentially a backup quarterback all year. They've only allowed more than 20 points one time this year. That was when they went on the road in Corvallis and lost to that Oregon State team 21-7. So when Utah has lost this year, it has not been an issue of their offense. It's been their defense. Or no, I got that flip. Defense was not an issue. Offense is what has been inconsistent. Now, their offense could very well be turning quarter for the Utah Utes. They put up 34 against Cal. And USC's defense, quite frankly, has left a lot more to be desired. USC is coming off of its third straight 40-plus point performance that defense has allowed this year. Because not just the 48 that they allowed against Notre Dame last weekend. They also allowed 41 against Arizona and 41 against Colorado. So if the Utah offense, even without Cam Rising, because we still haven't seen Cam Rising. He tore more than just an ACL, just one ligament. He tore basically everything is his knee. So we really don't know if we're actually going to see Cam Rising this season. I am not terribly sure. I think it's more likely he gets a medical red shirt and extra year eligibility because of that. But if Utah's offense without Cam Rising is going to turn a corner this year, you would think that it would be against this USC defense, which is among legitimately one of the worst in the entire country. But another reason why I think Utah can replicate some things in terms of being able to repeat what Notre Dame was able to do was that USC's offensive line. Last year, USC's offensive line was considered a strength of this team. One of the biggest strengths outside of Caleb Williams. And now, at best, it's a question mark. At worst, it could be a liability. And Utah's got a very good pass rusher by Jonah Ellis. He is currently number 2 in the nation with 9 sacks. And historically, Utah has been able to fluster Caleb Williams. Utah got 11 sacks in those 2 meetings last year, both of which Utah was, in fact, able to win, both in Salt Lake, Utah, and also in the Pac-12 championship game as well. So here we are, a little bit of barbecue on the titties. One thing that is working in USC's favor, one thing that I will certainly say on the matter is that at least USC is going to be home, and it's easier to bounce back and try to win at home versus trying to bounce back against, say, on the road yet again. They do have that advantage going in their way, but we'll check out what the game line currently says. It's currently listed at -6.5. The model not only thinks that the wrong team is favored, the model thinks that it has quite a swing. It has Utah -7. So the question is so it's twofold. Does Utah generate enough big plays and show enough consistency on offense to put more pressure on Caleb Williams, maybe force the USC to be a little bit more one-dimensional and put it on Caleb Williams' shoulders to the point of where maybe he feels the need of playing hero ball? Because that's really what happened in that Notre Dame game, was that Caleb Williams was forced to play hero ball. And because of that, that's where a lot of those mistakes ended up coming in as a result of them playing that, so to speak, hero ball, right? So if they can do that, Utah has a good chance. And then USC, conversely, we've seen inconsistencies of Utah. So conversely, if the USC defense is finally going to turn it around in Pac-12 conference action, this is the game to do it. Because I think in terms of the games that they have left after this, besides maybe Cal following this weekend, they're not going to play against an offense that's worse than what Utah's is, because they'll also have Washington, Oregon, and UCLA all happening at the same time, or at least at the end of the season. They're going back to back to back like a Drake song. And I feel like it's more likely for me to believe that because Utah could create just enough offensively, that they'll be able to find a way to win this game. So the USC line has increased quite a bit since this opened up. It originally opened up at 5.5. I've seen it at as much as 6.5 all of a sudden. But we're going to side with the model. Well, I don't think it's going to be a 7-point win for Utah. I think Utah finds a way to win this game, knocks USC out of college football playoff contention, and then with USC getting a conference loss and Washington possibly still being undefeated, depending on what they do against Arizona State, I think the race for that second Pac-12 spot to get to the Pac-12 championship in Vegas is going to get a lot more interesting. And we knew that this is going to be an extraordinarily fun conference to watch. Wasn't joking to y'all, you guys. It's going to be a fun one. But to answer y'all, in terms of what I think is going to happen, I think Utah is going to win. And we're certainly going to take that 6.5 that Vegas is going to be giving us for this upcoming matchup in LA, California. So that does wrap up all the top 25 games that I did want to take the time to talk about. But before I leave you guys here tonight, I want to impart some wisdom on you guys in terms of some best bets that you could make this upcoming weekend. Oh boy, do we have our fair share of best bets that we can certainly do this upcoming weekend. That's for sure. I'll show what we did earlier this week. This is from the podcast that we released on Tuesday morning. This was recorded on a Monday. So we have South Alabama at the minus 18.5. We originally saw them at minus 17.5. We did see them go to that 17. No, what am I talking about? South Alabama was at 17.5. That's when we came in on. South Alabama blew out Southern Miss, like we predicted, and it was a blowout. South Alabama won by 50 plus. They're really turning a corner, and they're looking like a team that truly is capable of winning the Sun Belt. So we're 1 for 1. We also have a game that just happened last night. New Mexico State going on the road against UTEP. We were right there as well. We bet on the under of 49.5. And you know what happened? We've got the under of 49.5. New Mexico State did end up winning 28-7. I didn't think that both offenses would be consistent enough to hit that over. And we were right. UTEP only scoring 7 really does help. You love to see it. So we are 2 for 2. And that means we are halfway officially to getting that 4 for 4 special that's oh so famous over at Wendy's. So how do we get over the top? How do we make the 4 for 4 happen here in week number 8? I'm going to show you guys a game here that's going to be happening tomorrow night. And then I'm going to show you guys a game on Saturday that I was really liking. And I think it's a definite value play for Saturday. Maybe a game that we talked about, so to speak. So we'll jump into Friday first. Friday night, there is only one singular game that's going to be happening. It's SMU going on the road against Temple. It is an American Conference game. And I believe that SMU is going to be able, they will ultimately be able to win against Temple. The line right now is at 20.5 right now. And we truly believe that SMU, they are going to cover this. I just don't believe in Temple. I think Temple silently has been one of the worst teams in the entire country. And SMU, meanwhile, this is a team that has aspirations to compete for an American Conference championship. SMU is in the running to make this happen. So I think SMU is more motivated, and I think they are going to really take it out on Temple. So while that 20.5 does seem pretty high, I do think SMU actually does cover this somewhat comfortably. This could be a game where SMU absolutely blows the doors off of Temple. And then on Saturday, this is a game that we actually talked about earlier tonight on the podcast. It's that noon game against Penn State and Ohio State. This line, this over-under line, started close to 50. It's down to 45.5. And while these two teams are very stout teams, I believe that they'll still hit this over a 45.5. And here's why. And I kind of talked about this earlier. Penn State has went against a similar caliber of defense in the Iowa Hawkeyes earlier this year. They were able to put up 30 plus still. Matter of fact, Penn State has been able to put up 30 plus the entire year, thus far at least. Ohio State, on the other hand, we've seen Kyle McCord grow quite a bit as the season has progressed. We've seen him mature. I think he's playing at a higher level than maybe what we saw him in the first month of the season. There's just too many weapons offensively for Ohio State to be held quiet for most of the day. And the weather report actually isn't as bad as anticipated. It's going to be in the mid 50s. It might be a little bit windy, but it's not going to rain. So it's better conditions that are conducive to what Ohio State wants to do, which I think it's going to pass the ball. They're known for explosive plays. I actually think that Ohio State and Penn State does hit that over at 45.5 because of those two factors. And we're going to be in for a classic on our hands. I really cannot wait for Penn State and Ohio State to duke it out at high noon on Saturday. So those are the two bets that we are adding on the Wendy's 4-for-4 special. We'll see if we can make that 4-for-4 happen. Those 4-leg parlays, when it comes to betting on games, can be a little bit difficult at times, but I believe this is something that we could do to make it happen and make the dream come true. But we're closing in on about an hour, give or take a few minutes on either end. So actually a very reasonably length podcast here tonight. I'm actually proud of what we've been able to do, talking about the top 25 games, as well as talking about my best bets for this upcoming weekend. So that being said, next time you guys do end up seeing me, it will be probably on the following Tuesday or Monday night. Depends on when I'm able to record and edit that podcast out. For that next podcast, what we are playing is we're going to talk about the games that do surprise me the most, at least those top 3 most surprising games, in my opinion. And then we'll also have, of course, that week 9 power rating review. That's going to really determine how much things truly do change. But guys, if you made it through the entirety of this podcast, let me just say this first and foremost. You, sir, are in fact the real MVP. And because I think you are the real MVP, you know what real MVPs do? They hit that like button. You know what real MVPs do when they find a channel that they really like in terms of college football content? They hit that subscribe button as well. It only takes a few seconds to do, boys and girls. You know, we're inclusive over here. You know, we don't discriminate. You know, as long as you love college football, you enjoy it, you're always more than welcome. So We're going to sign off for tonight. I am your host, Jake. I am going to sign off. I will see you guys early next week talking about those reactions to the Week 8 college football games. Until then, we are going to sign off, but hoping you guys are all out there having a good one. Take care, everybody.